we're going to do a little bit about writing for the press. So engaging with the media, why you should do it, and a little bit about how you can do it as well. So moving on to the next slide. So today we're going to kind of do about why you should share your news with the media, why it could benefit you. And we're going to talk about some different ways of engaging. So like kind of the tools in your toolbox. So it's not just a press release. There's lots of ways that you can get your stories into the media. Tips and tricks, a few of them, but not that many because we've only got a little bit limited amount of time. And then I'm going to hand over to Andy from Fishing News, and he's going to show you a few ways in terms of the kind of news stories that come into fishing news and why you should share your stories. So I'll crack on. So why share your story? I mean, I'm from Mindfully Wired Communications, so you probably just think, well, that's your job. Like you should be like writing press releases and kind of sharing news stories. But you're right, we do a lot of press like release writing for organizations, predominantly in the fisheries kind of area, but mostly for the kind of producer organizations, fishing associations, a few for charities. But there's a real gap for people, working fishermen, to actually be engaging with the media. And the reasons why are kind of here. I think one of the biggest ones kind of is like combating fake news, which I think fake news is a term like obviously that's come from kind of the era of the man who should not be named. But a lot of the time, like national news, they get it wrong, and that happens a lot. And the only real reason of like being able to actually kind of to tell the truth in terms of all the real life stories, actually correct the media with real life case studies. So a really good example of that was literally like at the beginning of February, when there was a report in The Guardian, and there was an invasive king crab species that could, risk the brown crab. And, there was a lot. And that was The Guardian, that was national news. And, there was a real flurry of information about it. Completely wrong. And the only reason that it was actually corrected was like Holderness Fishing Industry Group and the Whitby Lobster Hatchery taking a picture, IDing it, and then Fishing News running a story on it. So a lot of the time it can be corrected, but only if you guys, the people that are in the know, actually speak up and say, hang on a minute, that's wrong, and this is why, this is a case study. So that's a really good reason of actually sharing your story. Positive press. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the time the press do seem to pick up on the negative, but we need to be able to combat that. We need to be able to combat it and be ready with good news stories. And almost you feel like you need to kind of flood the media with those good news stories, because there is a lot of good stuff happening around, and it just so happens that the negative stuff finds its way in. But I think wherever we have the good news stories of people working really hard, people doing a lot for their fishing communities, that's what we should be sharing and, having the opportunity to do so. So another one, educating your audiences and audience on the realities of fishing life. So like there's been obviously This Fishing Life on BBC, which has just opened people's eyes to what actual like fishing, what it is. It obviously does happen out at sea. A lot of it is really hidden because, it's not viewed, it's out at sea. And like This Fishing Life, like my mum was super excited. She was like, is this what you do, like is this what fishing really is? And like people don't know. So educating your audience in terms of like what that means and what that means to go out and put food on the table, the risks that you're having to take, that's an education. And people, I think, assume people know about it, and they really don't. Ashley, who's joined us today, is really putting her life and fishing kind of the realities on Instagram, and she has now become a real spokesperson really for like people like ITV and BBC getting in touch with her and actually asking for the real story. So that's just a real benefit, I think, for the industry. Another one is like celebrating the wins. So last year in 2021, the St. Ives Fishing Co-op basically started up a fish shop, and that hit national news. That was on BBC, which kind of, it was the right time because it was during COVID. So, there was a lot of people that were really interested in buying fish from the quay. And it went out at the right time and it got picked up, and it was on BBC News, and it was a really nice, good news story. They'd used some money, they got some storage facilities, could store bait, and then started a fish shop so they could sell directly from the fish quay. Really nice story, could inspire somebody else. And that's a nice story to kind of shout about. So that's an opportunity to talk out, to share with the media. Another one is kind of showing fishermen as individuals. I think a lot of the time we talk about the industry, the fishing industry, and it almost like we like pull them all together in one big pool. It's just not the case. There are fishermen, of different size vessels who use different gear. Some people go out for a month, some people go out for a week, some people go out for a couple of hours. You're not all the same. So showing fishermen as individuals rather than just one big industry that you're doing the same thing is just not the case. So having that ability to share your voice and share your story is really important. So you're not just, stamped as one big industry. And then the last one, I think, which is really important, and I think a lot of the work that Fishing into the Future are doing is building a profile for the fishing industry and actually allowing people to share their stories, so policymakers, managers, government, those decision makers can actually see the positive news that's happening. And actually, the more they know about what you're doing on the northeast coast or the southwest coast, the kind of work that you're putting in and you're sharing with like a wider audience, the more they're going to want to engage with you, because you're actually putting your best foot forward and you're actually trying to, do something different, like fish sustainably, you're doing something safe. I think the more that we can shout about that and they can see that, will start to influence policy, because, with the Joint Fisheries Statement, regional management groups, they are looking for opportunities to learn more about their industry and you. So that's kind of my kind of why you should say your story. And I think, Andy, you did want to say something, didn't you?
Yeah, if I can jump in there. I mean, don't underestimate the power of a story like this in any format. I'm not very good at social media, so I can't comment. But for example, 25% of our readership are non-fishermen and non-fishers. They're DEFRA, they're NGOs, they're fishing consultancies, and they're short of information, and they're especially short of information from people at the coalface. They'll rely on a manager in an MMO office, or they'll rely on what they've read in the newspaper, or they'll rely on what they've heard from a junior somewhere down the line who's visited where the story is from. And you wouldn't believe the power a little story can have in the press. One example, when I was a fisherman in Grimsby back in the 90s, there was a power station killing fish, and we were getting nowhere. The Grimsby Telegraph came down to the pub where we used to meet once a month. We got on the front page, and suddenly the power station, who'd refused to speak to us, were getting asked questions by everyone about the intake, killing lots and lots of small fish. Another example is from Fishing News we did in, I think, my second week when I joined in September. We actually spoke to a freshwater crayfish fisherman. It was a slightly odd story to stick in Fishing News, but there's a real mess in terms of the way the fishery is governed and regulated. It's entirely contradictory. And the fisherman in question got a phone call from CFAS 2 weeks later to say, Bob, what's happened? My manager's asking me questions. People in London are asking me questions. And it was all through that story in Fishing News. So you're not just talking to other fishermen, if you like, you're getting your story direct into people's faces that otherwise you will never be able to speak to. So it's really worth making the effort. And again, one thing I was going to say in my tips, but if you call people names or just are angry, they're going to switch off and they won't read the rest of the story. If you've got something constructive or newsworthy or informative, it will stick with them. Sorry, Harriet, for interrupting.
No, I love golden content. Thank you. Right, so I'm just going to go on to my next slide just to talk about the different ways of engaging. Some are more effort and some are not that much effort. So it's really good to just know the tools in your toolbox. So if you go on to the next slide. So yeah, these are the press tools. So I'll start with the ones that are a little bit more kind of effort. So media advisory, really quick to do. It's sent in advance of a newsworthy event, a launch, something that is happening, an announcement. It's really short. It just details the who, what, where, and when of your launch or your event. It comes before a press release. So if you've got an event that's happening in, August, in July, send out your media advisory and send it out to the likes of Fishing News. You could send it out to regional press, so your local press, so you kind of that you kind of read, so like your Cornish Fishing Live, that sort of thing. And that's low effort for you because you're just telling people what's going on. It may get a journalist really excited, and then you can start up that dialogue, and then that will then lead them to put, either put a press release out, so put an article out, or potentially come to your launch or your event. But I think it gets it into the news, it puts it on their radar. It's really good to just put it out there, and it's really low effort. Press release, a little bit more effort, but it's a 500 to 800 word document. You've got a short, punchy headline followed by a lead. This is like your third most important thing. It's a really punchy sentence that talks exactly, it kind of leads you into the story. It talks about your hook. It's normally your what, where, when, and how. You've got to kind of be punchy with it. It's really important. But then you kind of go on to having quotes from relevant sources, so from people that you're engaging with, or a fisherman, or whatever the press release is about. You've got to have your quote. But the most important thing about a press release is that it doesn't include your opinion. And although you really want to share your opinion, it is not your opinion. So you can't be like, this is the best fishery in the world, because that is your opinion. You could put it in quotes, so someone else could say that, but really you've got to stick to the facts. So that's one of the hardest things about writing press release. It's not great writing. They're not, a lot of the time, they're not really written well. You've got to have your facts in there. You've got to have a punchy headline and your lead. But, it's normally about a page is probably your best length and the most information in there. You can put it in an email, send it over, and a lot of the time people will just copy it and pop it in their article, which is really great. That's exactly what you want. You want someone to just use your words exactly how you put them in, and then put them in the press release. Someone like Andy may do a little bit of red pen, but a lot of the time what you write is what will go in. Next is the ones that are, I'll go to kind of responding to a call out. So that's actually something that the Fishing News did really recently. They asked for stories on, if people have been affected by the MCA Small Vessel Code. That's like the perfect example, because that's literally offering for you to share your story, share your voice, share what has impacted you or how it has impacted you. So you should get in touch if you've got something to say, and if they're asking for it, then make sure that you respond, because more likely or not, you're going to get your story, you're going to be heard, and that is good. Letter to an editor, I think, really informal, low effort, personal, literally an email, dear editor. You can stick to the facts, you can share exactly what you want to say. It ends with a call to action in the sense of like, what do you want that editor to do? What do you want people to know about? It's an easy way to kind of get your thoughts and feelings or what is happening into press. And they happen all the time. They happen with all of the kind of bigger nationals, but also for local press as well. So they'll always have a letter to the editor at the beginning of in press release, in articles. And then a series. So this is a little bit more effort. It's high value, it's got a long lead in, and so that means you have to start quite early on if you want to get it in like the next two months. Fishing News did it really recently with the Seafood Innovation Fund. They did a series of articles over a month talking about all the projects that the fund funded. It normally has a kind of a common theme or a hook, and you could literally get your story in Fishing News each week for a month. it will kind of need you to have that communication with the editor. It would normally be quite a lot of effort on you because you are going to have to write those articles, but they don't have to be super long. And if there's something that you're really passionate about, that might be okay. But that's always, something quite nice to have a series in a publication. And then the last one is the most effort, but actually really, really high impact, is a press tour. So again, big announcement, big event. It's an in-person experience. So you're inviting the press to come along. You're inviting them to write their own story. You're inviting them to take pictures, meet people, see the impact that you have created. It does really need you to have a bit of a relationship with kind of a journalist, or the starting of a relationship. But we run events first kind of in Cornwall, and we'll always have a little press tour before an event to get the press excited, make sure they write about it, and then take pictures. And it's a really nice way of getting your story into the press. So I'm just going to do a few kind of tips and tricks that we're going to have a much broader presentation on the Fishing into the Future website, the porthole, in a couple of months, which goes into a lot more detail about how to write a press release. But I've just taken one of the slides out, and to kind of, when you're thinking about writing a press release, you've got to think of your hook. So it's the reason why your story is interesting. Journalists like trade in hooks. They want to know that their readers are going to be interested. So like, bait your hook carefully. So think about why it's interesting. Is it a first? Is it the first thing? Is it the first time anyone's ever done anything? Is it the first, lobster you've ever seen, or something like that? Terrible example. Is it a really proud moment for your community? Is it something like the St. Ives Fishing Co-op, where you've just got a new ice machine on the side of the quay, which allows fishermen to ice their catch, and increase the quality of it and increase the sale of it, and so the fishermen get more for their catch? Are you selling it to the quayside, to customers? That's exciting, and something that's good for sector press, so something like Fishing News, but that's also really good for your regional press as well. That is useful for people that are local and are going to be interested. Is it a political moment? Have you helped to shape policy? Is something happening that you want to shout about? Is it a branding moment? Have you got a new website? Have you just been MSC certified? Have you there's kind of lots of have you rebranded your van or got a new logo? Like, that might seem really small to you, but actually quite interesting for sector press, and again, for local news outlets. So again, like people's identity, something emotive. I think that story of potentially a young person coming into the industry and looking to pave the way for the future of fishing, like, that's emotive. That pulls on people's heartstrings, but also it's a really nice, good news story, and people like to know about young people coming in to the industry and carrying it on for future generations. So think about your hook. It could be anything, but you've just got to make sure that it is interesting, and not just to you, but to kind of the wider industry. Okay. So this is just a really short example of a media advisor. I just wanted to show you how simple it really was. So we put this together a couple of years ago for a big dinner for Seafood Cornwall, which is the marketing arm of the Cornish Fish Producers Organisation. We wanted to get MPs to meet fishermen and Cornish chefs, and we wanted to put on kind of local produce that was caught. We were trying to get megrim on the menu, so Cornish sole. So we'd had a tasting event and a product launch. We put limited spaces to make it sound really unique, and that they were invited and that they were special. So we had a really kind of punchy couple of sentences, and then you've got your when, your where, your who is going to be there, and why they should come, and then contact information. Really simple, but was really effective, and did get press there. You had an MP figure in there, you had a chef, and you had some tasty fish. So it was, you know, exciting time, and it did really well. So I think that's everything from me. So I'm just going to hand over to Andy, and he's got some examples from Fishing News.
Paul, if you go down to the bottom, you'll show you how long this press release is. Drag it down, and it's giving us all the facts in the world that we possibly need. But I'm slightly losing the will to live already. Don't click no, please don't. But this was about some quite good news, and this involves, like I say, some well-targeted research money that will help the industry. So if you scroll down to the first, this normally happens. You'll get some boring information. You'll get a quote. So this has started straight away. It's lots of money. Oh, it isn't. It's 1.4% of money that's already been announced anyway. So it's not new money, if I'm being a cynic. They've gone straight into a bit of information that clearly shows this is aimed at another audience, about 400,000 seabirds worldwide, when there's almost no evidence of any damaging interaction with seabirds in the UK. And they quoted a number of birds that most people won't know about, but it looks like this is great wildlife money as well. So we scroll down a bit further, and we see they're still talking about the same 100 million that's been covered in many, many other press releases. We next have the paragraph about the TCA, and we talk yet again about this incorrect figure of 333 million of paper fish. So this is using 1.4 million of money to get a message across about wildlife credentials and the wonderful benefits of Brexit to the fishing industry. Then finally, we get a quote from the politicians introducing it. And we can see 100 million straight away. Let's talk about 100 million repeatedly all the time, so everyone thinks that seafood money is constantly coming in. And we get a wonderful idea about sustaining a fishing industry in the marine environment. So almost nothing. And then we have this new UK government minister also saying it's great to see it in Scotland. Which got me slightly confused because he's saying this from London, and it then turned out that actually he failed to be elected as an MSP last year, gave a large amount of money to the Tory party and became a Lord the next day and a minister the day after. So this has got me rather interested. And then we finally get down to the good news, if you scroll down a little bit, which is the fishing industry science partnerships. So if you can scroll down, and here is the meat of it. And again, if we look, so there's two really nice projects with some money, and if we look at some of the others, so the one talking about the 400,000 seabirds all around the world, it's a £16,000 grant for someone to write a proposal. So this is spin doctoring, really. There it is. So in fact, out of this 100 million to help seafood, and out of the 1.4 million that's going to do science, there's £16,000 to possibly look at doing a study on whether they'll do more work. But that was their headline. You can see their target audience. Can we skip on now to this is next week's issue of Fishing News. So here we are. This is what we turned it into. And this you'll see this if you get Fishing News. This should land on your doormat on Monday. So we tried to pull out from this what's relevant to our readership and what's relevant to the real story. So you'll see that we've got the same facts in there, but we've tried to make it relevant to you, the reader. So we've talked about where the projects are, how they'll involve them. We explained it's part of the money that's already been announced. We've honoured the quotes from the two ministers involved. So that we behaved ourselves, if you like. And they can't complain. And then we tried to put it all into context. So I phoned round and I spoke to Chloe at the Western FPO, who's one of the partners, and Hannah, who you might know, who's doing a PhD at Heriot-Watt University, because I wanted the universities involved. And talking to them, we found out actually this is what the industry likes. Mm. And this is actually behind all that spin. It's quite a good story, and even better, this is a story about how other people and other fishermen elsewhere in the country can also get funds to do some proper research. This is what we've been asking for decades. The headline I didn't like, that slipped past me, this new partnership. We should have celebrated it. On the front cover of Fishing News, we've got a very positive industry welcomes new funding. So this wasn't negative. And then we broke out a story. People don't like to read very long stories. And the second part of the press release about there's money available. If you see on the right, the box about you might be able to apply for money. So that's how we've tried to turn a fairly slanted press release into something that's of relevance to our readership and to engage people. And then can we move on to the second one that's also from this week's Fishing News? And the first will be that's right. Thank you. This came through from a consultancy company, and it's like, can you print it? And the answer is no. I mean, it's right. If I'm looking at this and I'm a fisherman, we're independent consultancy, blah, blah. You're getting paid to ask me questions and I'm not getting paid, and then you get all the benefit. No. So this is how to turn people off, really. The very first words. I didn't have time to do this, and I mean, this came through very late. It was one of the tips you're going to do. If you want your story out, give the media time to actually look at it and read it. Don't put them under pressure. She said, she phoned me up, our contract's nearly finished. We haven't had a single response. Can you please print it? And I was like, if you rewrite it, and I'll give you some tips, then we'll stick it in. But as it goes, no, we're not touching it. And my advice was, make it a human story. Find somebody in the industry who's already doing some of this, show the examples and the benefits that have happened because he's had this traceability. Use him as an example, and then say, how about you in your fishing, in your own personal situation? Could this help you? Why don't you talk to us? The more you help us, the more the MMO can help you after we've reported back to them. And we didn't get that. If we can go on to the second news story, please. And we stuck this in at late notice on page 15. So this is it's on the right hand side, the Fisher's View sort on traceability. We didn't really get what we wanted, but it may or may not engage you as it was written. Yeah, it's on the right hand corner in light blue. There we are. But at least it's slightly improved. It's not saying, hi, we're a consultancy. If I was doing this, I would have made a bigger story. I would say I'd have put a real life example in it, but made it much more attractive. Something else where it went wrong was this was on behalf of the MMO, and they're not quoted in it. And they're not quoted in it because they didn't have 48 hours to go to a committee to get someone to sign it off. So at the very last minute, we had to put Ruth Dalton added because no one at MMO had been given permission by the boss's boss's boss. And again, give them time. It's still a damp squib of a story, but I hope it sort of helps you understand how we've kind of humanized it. And then finally, if we can go on to the example we've got from January, I think I picked one at random. Paul, if you can go on to the fishing news story. And I think we sent a link round, didn't we, of everybody's, of the actual magazine. Here we go. And you're welcome to this. There was a few people put out press releases about the Clyde closure. The SFF, the Simon McDonald at the Inshore Fisheries Group, the Clyde fishermen did. Two NGOs, one called Coast and another NGO, also put out press releases. They were all very, very factual. I know they're meant to be factual, very, very dry. And what I tried to do was tease out the different elements from that in order to make this a readable story and also to influence people. So I phoned up Elaine at the Clyde Fishermen's Association, who was very helpful. And I said, your press release is great. Thanks ever so much. But can you introduce me to some fishermen? And I spoke to 3 or 4 fishermen from the Clyde Association, and that gave us the extra boxes, which is the human cost. If you see there on page 3, it gave us the cover. That the pictures weren't very good on the cover, but a couple more fishermen sent in pictures their own activity, so that we linked it to real people and their livelihoods, and got quotes from them rather than generic quotes about just the impact on it. I managed to turn it into 4 stories. So if you click back to the next pages, you'll see that we managed to get a story from the NGO, who distanced themselves from the closure and said, no, this isn't what we asked for. Bottom left-hand corner, we got the inshore fishing group to do a separate story, and we turned it into something that was sort of very busy, but people could also read in bite-sized chunks. I hope we had an influence in terms of, I mean, there was a rethink about this. But that's the kind of approach that works. So if you're in a similar position, rather than banging the table and just saying, no, this is wrong, if you can send the good picture in, or to your local press, if it's happening to you in Cornwall or Shetland, send a picture into the press. This is my boat. This is who I am. This is my family. This is how it's impacting us. This is why we think it's gone wrong. This is where we think we've been misquoted. If you're just outraged, it's not such a good story, although that can help. But it's the more sort of detail and human aspect you can make, the more readable it is. I mean, you might disagree, and you might think these pages weren't very good, but I was doing my best, if you like, to give the full picture. And that's it. And I hope that makes sense. And I'll shut up.